Allow me to introduce you to ADAMA.
Atlanta is the Black Mecca. We know this already. We are home to people of African descent and the epicenter of arts and culture.
But where can you go to experience Black art and culture, illuminating the depth and breadth of the African diaspora?
Launched in March 2020 as a museum without walls, ADAMA quickly emerged as a space that is already engaged in communities around the world.
The best part about being a founding member of ADAMA
is knowing that I'm part of making history.
By contributing to ADAMA, you're joining a global community of dreamers and builders,
bringing forth a world-class museum
that highlights the Black global experience.
And it's all happening here.
Right here.
Right here.
Right here, right now.
Right here in Atlanta, Georgia.
Join us.
Give.
And get involved.
ADAMA.
Hey everyone, I am Sierra King. I am an artist, archivist, and curator here in Atlanta, Georgia, and I'm joining you this afternoon to speak with you about art, archiving, and just the relationships that we build across time. And I have some wonderful women and colleagues and sisters that I've worked with, Keondra builds Freemyn and Zakiya Collier. And I curated this series based on just the work that I've been doing in Atlanta here in the last 5 years with arts administration and archiving. But I wanted to bring in the lens and just the perspective of Black memory workers, because without Black memory workers and archiving, the artist's story kind of either gets lost or just fragmented across the African diaspora. And so the conversation that we'll be having today is just centered around different Black women artists such as Zora Neale Hurston and Carrie Mae Weems. Specifically, I'm just thinking about how they approach their lives and design their lives in ways that were just a new pathway for them specifically. And so I'll just get into the introductions. Keondra Bills Freemyn is a DMV-based archivist, writer, and Wikipedian, and former diplomat originally from South Central Los Angeles. A poet, essayist, and fiction writer, she is also the author of Things You Left Behind and the forthcoming collection For Lovers. She is founder of the Digital Archive initiative, the Black Women's Writers Project, highlighting the contributions in Black women and gender-expansive writers to the literary canon, and publisher at 67th Street Storytellers. Thank you, Keondra, for joining me today. Zakiya Collier is an Afro-Carolinian archivist and memory worker exploring the role in cooperative thought and improvisation, and the preservation and sustainability of immaterial cultural memory, particularly in African diaspora, queer, and community-based organizations and cultural heritage institutions. She is passionate about uncovering ancestral memory keeping traditions and developing archival practices that account for material conditions of Black life. So yeah, just thank y'all for joining me again. It's gonna be pretty informal as far as like we've all worked with each other in different capacities. But for everyone in the chat joining us, I want to know if you have seen this picture before, and I'm gonna drop a link in the chat. If you've seen the picture before, and if you have, get your answer down yes or no. And then also another question I have for you is, who is a favorite Black woman artist or Black woman writer? And at 12:05, everybody's going to press enter. So you're going to, if you've seen the photograph before, say yes, and then who's your favorite Black woman writer or Black woman artist? Hopefully, I can get some answers at 12:05. It's 12:05 now, so you can press enter. Or even starting with Keondra and Zakiya. Do you have your answers?
You want to say it?
Yeah, you can say it.
Okay. You always feel like I'm choosing when I choose a favorite Black woman writer because that's like what I do. But to be totally honest, it's definitely Sonia Sanchez. She's just my favorite because I feel like the commitment to community is just very clear and has always been clear at every point in her career. And yeah, I have seen this picture. It's one of my favorite pictures.
And what's yours, Zakiya?
I have also seen the picture, and my answer would be Octavia Butler. I think just her forethought and ability to like look backwards and forwards and use, she just has like an archival mind that projects into the future. And I think that is just incredibly beautiful. And yeah, and I'm a sci-fi horror nerd person, so yeah.
And I'm gonna come from the artistic lens. Of course, the mother of all mothers, Carrie Mae Weems, and just her being just like a pillar in what photography is today, at least for me. Specifically, I was thinking about, or have been thinking about when after she did the kitchen table series, she did the roaming series, and she just began placing herself in these different environments. And you wouldn't see her face. Usually you see the back of her or her turning her head, and kind of just that practice of refusal, but just a stance of like power. And I just love that series, just seeing the different like environments change and her taking up space in that way. I brought up this picture with Toni Morrison and the different writers, Alice Walker, I don't believe June Jordan is also on here. And just because it was one of those pictures where you see a moment in time where like women gathered, and they like documented that particular time. And I kind of like did the red string kind of workshop of like trying to figure out like how each of them knew of each other. So I guess to speak to this photograph, in our first like moving into the conversation. When you're archiving or starting to think about like the relationship you're building with women or artists that you're working with, um, how necessary is it for you to prioritize also extending like those meetings and invitations and getting to know the women that they've also like surrounded themselves with?
That's a really great question. I think, yeah, I think it's something that's incredibly important to me to kind of know the full person, and I think the people that you surround yourself around definitely inform who you are as a person. It is kind of like the people who feed you spiritually and also feed you food, probably if they're Black women. So people who feed you spiritually, emotionally, and inspire you, and just who you surround yourself around, I think uh, speak to kind of what your documentation would look like. What are the things that would show up in that work based on who is in your community, what type of events you're going to, what type of events are you a part of, or maybe that you're just there by nature of supporting, one of your sister colleagues, or sister colleagues and friends. And so, yeah, I think for me, it is incredibly important to, sort of work with the artists themselves, but then also for me, I show up to other events that they may be doing that have nothing to do with the archival work itself. Like you're on a panel, or you're at a community event. Like I want to come to that too, because I want to see the people that you surround yourselves with and meet them, and then I almost always learn something new. About the person themselves, the community, the time, then forming a new relationship with one of their friends in digital spaces, and becoming, I feel like it's.
Yeah. I work with a lot of dead folks. Unfortunately, people already transitioned, so a lot of it is an extra layer of research, and so that's kind of built into all of my archival practice, because what I really focus on is archival discovery. So the archives that are already there, how can we contextualize them through Black Women Writers Project and help folks find them? And so, just these little things like learning like how Lucille Clifton and Toni Morrison were at Howard at the same time, and then later weren't really friends, but then later on Toni Morrison edits Lucille Clifton, and these are, unless you read the whole book on Toni Morrison, then maybe you wouldn't find out that tidbit, but I'm trying to like basically make it look easier for you to gather those little bits of information that maybe don't make it to the larger conversation, but that are really, really important to know, like that these networks have been built over a lifetime, and people are like touching points at different points in their lives, right? Like when I last saw you, you were an editor, right? And now you're an editor at Random House. So I think that a lot of what I do is trying to bring together information that's already there to help contextualize the relationships that people have with each other. And with the folks that my clients who are living, most of them are on the visual arts side, filmmakers, some activists. And what I try to stress to them is that, like, even things you don't think are important, we need to say, because that is how we understand the context. So which is getting harder and harder in the digital world. Certainly people have paper material still. It's like, you might think that this Christmas card that your friend sent you is insignificant, but it actually tells us a lot about the relationships that you kept and how that informed your artistic practice or this particular point in your life. You were at Skowhegan, right? Like if people were sending you letters when you were at Skowhegan, like that's the major thing. You're stuck in the woods for a couple months. Like we want to know what those relationships were and what kind of conversations were being had. And so in the present, it's really helping people understand that even even the person themselves might not see the value in it, but helping them understand, like, we're looking at this we want to see it through the full lens, so that people then don't rewrite that story for you.
Yeah. And I guess coming off of that, can you speak a bit about the Black Women Writers Archive? And I know you started it in 2019, and I was reading about how um, just the beginnings of it from your looking at your mother's vinyl collection and wanting to hear the voices of these different writers, and that being like a pivotal point in your collection or just discovery of different archives. Can you speak to like how it started, and then also like I guess what you're thinking about it now, or moving into the future?
Yeah, sure. Thanks. I feel like every time I tell the story of the origins of Black Women Writers Project, it's different. But I think that's life, right? Like now I can look back on my life and say, this was a point, a turning point that made me look towards the archive and this and this and this. I've been an archivist since, in my opinion, since I was 12, right? So that's when I really got serious about collecting and history. And so I think, so since you already mentioned the vinyl moment, I'll talk about another moment, which is one of my friends who's a writer in New York City. I was helping her move from one apartment to the other. And there was like a nondescript cardboard box. And she's like, be careful, that's my child's inheritance, right? And I'm like, and come to find out, it's like her archival materials and all her manuscripts. And I was like, and it's just here in a cardboard box, you know? And it made me realize like, oh, this is a community need. Like this is a need like for us to have these skills and be able to share it. And so that is also a big turning point of Black Women Writers, is like, wow, I think I was assuming someone else is doing it, right? And then I started to look more closely and I'm like, actually, there can never be enough archivists because everybody needs this help. And so I decided to launch the website and the archive finder kind of out of this idea of like, for us, by us. I see myself as a member of the Black literary community, and this is what I want to give back. And that kind of then led me down the path of becoming like a professional archivist. But you know, I've had practices and preservation practices for most of my life. So, and you know, thinking about moving forward, I only have, I think, 52 people listed in Archive Finder, but I have a list of over 200 archives. So just that in the foreseeable future is trying to get all of that information out and easily available, because unfortunately not all of these archives are able to be found through databases and so forth. So try to bring together that information in one place. That's first and foremost. Continuing to build out information on Wikipedia pages about the history, because there are a lot of Wikipedia pages and a lot of them have misinformation, and a lot of them, even more, have incomplete information about Black women writers.
And Zakiya, you're working in archival studies, Black memory work. I guess not so much your origin story, but I guess where do you see yourself now? And like what I guess major projects you're working on? I know you just come off of the book project with Marilyn Nance and The Last Day of Legos. Not Last Day of Legos. What was the title? My bad. Last Day in Legos.
Yeah.
Last Day in Legos. Okay. Yeah, so just that experience, and like I guess if you're hoping to work with more artists in that capacity, or how you want to, I guess, change that format, or what you did or didn't like about that time.
Yeah. So you asked a really big question of like, where do I see myself in all of the many things. I'm like looking at my like pin board in front of me with 1,000 sticky notes on it. So I'm like, let me just pick one and talk about that. But where do I see myself in the work right now? I think I'm at a particular intersection, but I think I've always have been just sort of the collaborations and spaces have changed, even if they're like still present, kind of, sort of. But I think sort of at the intersection of community archives, Black history in all shapes and form, from like personal, sort of like in personal archives and individuals sort of managing their own materials, to the sort of larger scale of thinking about, the future of Black Twitter, for example, which is like, Black folks are not a monolith. Black Twitter is not at all monolithic and contains so many parts. But then also thinking about the Black web, and what that is and what that looks like and has looked like over sort of the history of the internet. And so, so there's like a digital component. So community archives, digital archives, Black history, and then also community building between archivists and folks that are looking to manage their archives. Because like Keondra said, like there could never be enough archivists. There can never be enough Black archivists because, as long as we are here and have been here, there are materials that need care. And there's like a serious need for, us to sort of continuing to come together to support each other in this work, because it can be hard to do it alone. And so, I think that's something that is incredibly important to me, and just becoming even more pressing, the need to sort of come together and make this work easier for all of us. And as far as sort of working with the visual artist Marilyn Nance, my work with Marilyn has sort of been on with her archive itself, and sort of what she says, I bring contours and form to her archive, because she has maintained it herself for the entirety of her career in her studio. I walked in, she had the archival boxes. She knows where most things are, and wanted some improvement on the strategy and to sort of collaborate in, like she is very active in her archive, and like, this is a collaboration. This is not a archivist takeover. And I think even in first coming to work with her, it just illuminated so many things for me in thinking about this collaboration of like, it doesn't have to be sort of what we see in the traditional sense of, archival institution comes in, they see what's there, they take what they want, they leave the rest, and they maintain the relationship with the individual for the purposes of future donations, perhaps monetary and archival. And not maintaining any sort of relationship in another way. And so I think, with her being so active in her own archive, it's just a relationship that sort of started around archives, but the relationship is now bigger than that. And then we collaborate on a lot of other things. It's just like, okay, we're here now. And sort of when, from the time I met her, she's like, I'm gonna put out a book. And it wasn't necessarily it's always been in the works since she left Lagos in 1977. It's been in the works, and it's informed by all of the life and all the work that she's done since 1977. And I think sort of when the opportunity to do the book came about, there sort of was this shift in sort of like, okay, we need to like locate materials for a particular reason. And this is sort of where the work comes in to say, like, we've done this collaboration. We know where things are. We're able to kind of speak to each other. And she's able to speak with her editor and make decisions about which photos tell her story in the best way, and tell the story of Festac 77 in the best way. And I had the pleasure of also contributing in a very librarian way of contributing bibliographies to the book, which I I find to be a really, I don't know, it's kind of poetic to me. I think bibliographies really, I mean, of course, create a context for a specific moment. And I created one around Marilyn Nance and sort of the context that she has emerged from, the Black arts movement, Black feminism, and archival practices, but able to sort of say, you know, these are some texts that, you know, open us up to even more. But the bibliography also speaks to me as a person. It speaks to Marilyn, and gives people an opportunity to sort of do their own exploration into these topics while also enjoying the beautiful book. And I realize I'm looking at it, but like, and not showing it to you all, but yeah.
Yeah, I love the just different iterations of how you all are doing the work, to whether it's like um one pass or just noticing someone is doing the work, the already archiving, and you just want to come in and kind of just do the nuts and bolts around it and just give it more structure, or even I think a lot of the work is educational and allowing them to still have that ownership of their archive, like with Marilyn, or with another writer, of just saying, okay, here's what you're doing, but you can do X, Y, and Z. And so I think that is an important part of either like personal archiving or community archiving, is kind of leading them to that water, rather than like trying to like force the water down their throat. Um, I I've also been thinking about a lot of, whereas if the archive isn't in particular documents or in ephemera or photographs and artistic pieces, how are you all thinking about fragmented archives, or archives that are based on, I guess, experiences rather than a soul, like a physical document? I know you had wrote something um, in the Black Scholar about just the ways that we express ourselves and like that collective memory, and how I guess how y'all are including that in each of your processes. I hope that was like not a loaded way.
um, it's funny, I'm working on a project right now about this, but I think one thing that's always helpful is having incorporating oral histories, whether or not they exist in the materials yet or not, because I want to hear from the creator and the steward of those records what it means to them, and more information about their lives and how these things fit in. I'm also a person that believes that every archive is fragmented. I'm like, we never have the full story. And so that is, no matter how thorough the records are, it's always going to be fragmented, and that we kind of have to make, like, that's kind of what some part of it, what makes it exciting to me, right? Think about like Zakiya Hartman and Critical Fabulation, like there's space there for a record for us to imagine. Now the problem is that when people imagine things that, you know, kind of go against ethos or really how they live their lives. But I think when done with the right amount of care and respect, filling in those gaps can sometimes be where we can show up in those records, or when the researcher or whoever's using it, there's like capacity to expand the imagination of that person's life and how they worked. When the opportunity arises to fill in those gaps with the person who has created the archive or has, you know, participated in the creation of the archive, I do think things like oral histories can be really powerful. And also, in many ways, like thinking about the digital space, as we think about ephemera a lot of times, about like, you know, flyers and whatever, but the digital space is very much ephemeral, right? And so I think even like bringing those elements into a greater understanding of an archival practice is really important, because, you know, this information does help color our everyday lives, particularly the current generation who's kind of grown up or most of their lives with digital records and have written their manuscripts on computers and so forth. And that is a lot of that does, it's not often easy to capture all those little bits, right? You can't follow somebody's process or their research process as easily as if you saw a stack of books in their collection. It's like, what were you Googling to figure out to this idea? And so there is going to be a little bit more needed on our parts to engage with the creator when we can, and engage with the community when we can to find out more. And also, it's like, okay if we don't. Like, it's okay if we don't have all, like, nobody owes us the full story or a fuller story. Like, if they want that and if they are willing to go through that process, then of course letting them lead. But also, like, my curiosity as an archivist and like my desire to have something for posterity should not override somebody's individual decision to privacy or just like non-interest in sharing.
When you were speaking at first, it was making me, I guess, go back to what Zakiya was saying as far as like just cultivating a bibliographic practice while you're working with them, to where is that like you're almost, instead of approaching or I guess leading the conversation with saying that the archive is fragmented, maybe the approach that we're changing or moving to is bibliographic, and helping people understand that like it's, because I feel like when we say fragmented, it's like it's in pieces, right? But what if it's whole to that, like you're saying, to that person? Why are we describing it as fragmented when it can be something whole as it is? So I think moving towards a language of or a practice of bibliographic will, I guess, just deepen the conversation about how we think about, I don't want to say packaging somebody's life, but just like, like tying it in a nice bow or whatever. And again, respecting those kind of boundaries about like what is included and what's not included. Because at the end of the day, it is their decision and their kind of like autonomy to say that this is what I want it to be.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead, Keondra.
I just want to say a point. I was recently at the Sites of Memory conference on Toni Morrison's archive at Princeton. One of the things that I believe Dana Williams from Howard said is, trying not to approach the archive with this idea of like knowing that like what you see there means the person or something about their lives. It's just like, this is information that I'm ingesting and sitting with, but it doesn't have to mean that there's like a declaration I'm making about this person's life, and I thought that was really something I wanted to pass on to other folks as well.
Yeah, I like that. It makes me think about like sometimes when, like after someone processes someone's paper and it's like, you're now the expert on this person. And it's like, no, there's still more to know. And what made it into this particular archive is still only a fraction of someone's life, because so much of it is not physically documented. And I think, kind of going off of what you both said, just thinking about, I think it's important to just always remember that that fragmentation and seeing wholeness in fragmentation, right? Because it can't ever be, unless, even if you recorded the person's entire life, you still don't have everything. And so I think holding that in mind makes it a lot easier to then see the beauty in the materials that do exist, and then also allow you to come up with creative ways to gather more information. And so I know, like, for me in working with Marilyn, so much is documented because she's kept so much, and other people have kept materials, and she's documented other people's histories. But then she also says such amazing things, just like while we're eating lunch. And then so I have like a running document of the things that like may come from a conversation, or we get into this really deep like intergenerational conversation, and I'm like, let me just make a note of this. Like, it doesn't have to be like a fully detailed like interview or anything like that, but just like, I do think that she should do many oral histories, but in those moments, that's not the context for that time period. It's just like, this is a conversation, I'll make a note like this conversation was sparked by, this piece of material, or we couldn't find this and then we ended up talking about this, or, just kind of documenting how we got to a certain point and like what she said and what it made me think about. And so now it's sort of both of our documentation. I think that even that can be, it's taking advantage of what would have been an ephemeral moment and writing it down or documenting it in some other way. I tell people all the time when they're kind of like, well, what about if I can't like preserve this larger thing? Or if it's something that's really meaningful to me, but I can't, keep it because it's too big, or, family members are kind of, warring over this particular object. And so I can't have it in my possession. I'm like, create something else that represents it, that stands in it for you, draw a picture of it, or draw a picture of how it, what it means to you. Create some other artistic expression, whatever that may mean for you. Interview yourself talking about it, or have someone else interview you talking about the thing. And you may not ever have the physical object again, but like you now have memory of it, and either can revisit that for yourself, or it can serve as, sort of the larger documentation of that thing in your life, which otherwise, because you don't have the physical thing, may have gone undocumented, of like how important that thing was to you.
Fahamu asked a question. Are either of you familiar with the theory of remembering, which posed the way that trauma of European colonialism and enslavement have fragmented to the subjective Black body? I'm asking because I'm wondering how or if any of your work in the archive are guided by pre-colonial African theories and ideas around memory, history, and archive. I'm wondering how, if or any of your work in the archive are guided by pre-colonial, need to go back to school, our African theories and ideas are around memory, history, and archives.
Not in particular, but I will say that I think I'm always looking for approaching the archive through a lens that isn't just what, basically white people have given to us in terms of our understanding of ourselves, and even methods to archiving, and even the idea of like records, right? And how we understand records, even that idea. Because I don't know, I think about it a lot as just, again, as I said earlier in this conversation, about like a community good. So to me, history is a communal gift and something to be shared amongst each other and protected collectively. And so a lot of how I do that, and I don't know, I have not done the work on the pre-colonial theory, so I would love you to drop a link to that, a book that I should read on it. I'm open to it. But I do know that the skill, even structures and frameworks through which I've been taught archivists, is not like, well, if my community created it, it wouldn't look like that, right? And so I'm always just like remembering that is not the foundation through which I want to understand myself and commune with other people in their archives.
One of the articles that was in the Black Scholar that you edited, Zakiya, witnessing testimony and transformation as genres of Black archival practice, speaks to a bit of that. So whereas I think you did bring up oral history, Keondra, so as one of like the strategies to, I guess, go against pre-colonial traditions of archiving. And I think when I was getting at like the expression, or trying to kind of document the expression of Black memory, and how we have done that, I think is in the oral history, but it's just so much. It's more so of, I guess, when you're working with different communities, just understanding the structure of how they document it specifically for those communities. Because I think that changes based on who you're working with, because um, uh, because yeah, everyone has their own like way of doing things, so we have to be open about how they want to do it. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'll say for me, I think like Keondra, not directly, but I think sort of this theory that you've brought up of sort of this fragmentation from trauma, I think definitely shows up in the work of some of the people that I have been informed by in Black studies, and so I have kind of always come to this work with an understanding of the fragmentation of like the world as we know it, based on enslavement, based on colonialism, and sort of how that informs the way that like Black people live their lives and what our actual material conditions look like. And understanding that our archives and the way that we go about documenting ourselves have to take that into account. And so, yeah, again, I think not directly sort of with this specific theory and thinking about this specific text, but yeah, I think it has been in the work for sure. And also in the special issue that I did edit, there are two pieces in there specifically that kind of think about this fragmentation. One being Molly Collins's scrap theory. That's sort of what is within her her article, and kind of thinking about how we can use the scraps as a form of memory in a way that the scraps and sort of the resonances of state-sanctioned violence, or the resonances of the violences that Black people encounter every day, to still have an archive and still see it as an archive even of the trauma and violence. And then also thinking about Ashley Farmer's piece on the fragmentation of Queen Mother Moore's archives, and sort of what does it mean to sort of have the archives of our Black beautiful Black minds sort of like spread across different institutions, and do we want them in the same place? Is there some benefit to them being in different places versus always, trying to have the collection exist sort of in one specific place? And what sort of logic is that pulling from to sort of want to co-locate all of the things in one place? And so I think, yeah, there's definitely resonances between what you've shared here, and I look forward to reading the Something Torn and New. But yeah, I think it definitely shows up in some of the work I've been influenced by.
And I think that also coming full circle to even just the database of the Black Men Writers Project, is that yeah, these people have existed as whole people, but here's where their things are in this place, and this place. But it's not necessarily saying that they have to be all in at least one repository. I think just the accessibility of knowledge in those different places are just as powerful as them being located in one place. But then also, I think giving power back to the communities where they should be located. So even if that is saying, okay, Toni Morrison's archive is here at Princeton, but maybe we should move 50% back to her hometown, or 50% back to somewhere where she worked or where she taught, so it can have that geographical kind of foundation as well.
what if we could move archives around the way we do exhibits? What if travel like exhibit? You know what I mean? There's already an infrastructure for this. That would be amazing, right? Like if you did do that, and then many more audiences and folks could reach it.
That would be interesting. I mean, well, I guess they do it with the exhibits, like having the traveling exhibits of the Infirmia, but actually moving the whole thing to another place for X amount of time, to another like set of people to work with and to research and to care for. Yeah, rather than like having to spend like $5,000 traveling to a place just to have access to it.
I can see the temples throbbing. The institutions, the whole thing, these materials, they're like, you want to do what?
just for a moment.
I mean, they travel back and forth between the institution and offsite storage. So it's just another, truck ride to another institution.
I guess my last kind of question is also, I know that most of our work is based in here in the US. Do you see yourself doing any type of global work or with global communities or moving into the African diaspora? Since I guess knowing that you have this framework of it being less fragmented and understanding the different expressions and understanding the collective memory, do you see yourself moving into a global capacity as an archivist?
I think for me, I'm not a former diplomat like Keondra, but I think yes would be the short answer, but not sort of in the sense of like me going to like work at this specific archive in an uninvited sort of way, like if I wasn't invited into the space in that way. But I think it is important to forge community with archives in different spaces. So I'm going to Amsterdam tomorrow, Tuesday. I should probably know. But tomorrow maybe. And I'm going for a conference, but to me, it's like I could not go and not connect with the folks at the Black Archives in Amsterdam. And so I'm going. I know that they're doing some work. I was like, look, if there's anything I could do for like a day or two, put me to work. Like I will gladly do whatever you want me to do. Like I want to be able to contribute in a particular way if there's something where I'm not in the way. And so I think that is a way that I would like to show up. But I would also like there to be, networks and ways to, if there is a archival institution internationally that is in need of support in a particular way, and there is like a contingent of folks that are like, yeah, I'll go, passported out, all passported up, ready to go. And, we're able to organize something to go and support and be in community or, all hands on deck. And so, yeah, I think I see it as more of a network rather than sort of working in a particular context that I'm obviously not the expert in at all, but would love to, just be more in relationship with archivists and memory workers in different spaces as, so far as we're able to like help each other out and build things, create things together.
Yeah, I feel a lot with what Zakiya was saying, like definitely building community across borders. I definitely need to be invited to do anything. But I will say on the digital side, if there's anybody out there who speaks French, let's see, maybe Portuguese, One of the things I run up against in Black Women Writers Archive is that I only speak English and German. And so it's harder for me to find the digital records. Even if it's just like, we have this collection, I don't need to have access to the digitized records, but that would be great to just help also add those voices to the archive finder, because they're Black women too. It's not just about the US and English speaking countries. So that is definitely something I'm looking forward to on the digital side, without having to actually leave, travel to those places, but to be able to bridge that gap. Because there are records, like Audre Lorde and Maya have records at Free University in Berlin, right? And so that's a very, just like those little things, to be able to connect it to the work so that we can see that kind of global contribution of Black women writers. I'm definitely fascinated in. But yeah, I'm definitely open to it.
I didn't have any other questions. So again, thank y'all for joining me. I think this is just a ongoing conversation that we've always been having, or will continue to have as we grow in community. I also am thinking about just that global aspect of how we can just be of service, right? As a Black memory worker. And like you said, once the invitation is made, then definitely saying yes and allowing yourself to be of service, because I think that is just the common denominator in the type of work that we're all doing, because we understand that time is of essence, and doing it in a way that combats just the traditional ways of archiving, or the ways that we've learned. And Kayla said we can end early, so y'all can get some sunshine or wherever you're at. But again, thank y'all for coming, and whoever's in the chat for joining us, whether you're in Atlanta or in Africa or any of the other continents. I appreciate you for spending time with us. Also, my next conversation that did get canceled in April, the one that I was supposed to have before this, with the two artists, should be coming up, rescheduled with a new date for the fall. But it kind of got, I guess, for explanation, I wanted to have the conversation with the artist first before the archiving, to kind of give like context, but I guess archiving is more important as a priority. So yeah, just be on the lookout for the rescheduled date for the conversation with the artist. And if you want to find me, I'm on buildyourarchive.com and Build Your Archive on Instagram. But again, thank y'all. Go enjoy your day.